Hi guys, my name is Dante, and welcome back to Overpain. Today's patient is Feliza Vidori. Hi Feliza. With her quite an inventive kind of character of sci-fi horror genre. Hello. Hi. I've been watching your videos for a bit and they've inspired me to break away from relying on line art so much. But when I try to leave it behind, I get confused on where to put more detail and everything ends up flatter than I'd like. The image has a transparent background only because I wanted the shade of the glass bowl to depend on the background, but there is no other reason for it. It's really just a monster character girl that has the majority of her body inside the bowl and only her arms walk around. If you could give me some tips on where to go forward with it, it would be really cool. Either way, I'm glad your videos have helped me move this far forward. Thanks. Awesome, I'm glad I helped. And yeah, now actually let's give this a try. As I can see, Feliza didn't really ask for an overpain, just for some tips. So as Feliza said, the main issue that she had here is that everything looks really flat. And I think the main reason of that is that the character doesn't have a background. Like literally, I imported it, this is a transparent PNG file, but the flatness goes from the fact that when you don't have a background and you can't 100% decide on what kind of environment this character has, you can't really decide on how to render it. Because right now, we don't have any lighting angle or anything like that. So for the sake of this particular case, I will not assume that this is supposed to be used without a background, as Feliza said that there is no actual reason for the background to be transparent. Let's just assume that the background is actually white and actually keep the whole environment white, meaning like this is actually that kind of idealistic environment where you show the character or an object or an iPhone in purely white background, and how you go about shading something that is in this kind of environment. Because this is kind of like a very unrealistic, specialized way to present something, and it is kind of a complex thing to go about rendering wise. So to realize how to render this, we have to think about what this white environment is. In this particular case, we have the character actually standing on the white floor, so this character is inside of that white world. And so by having this kind of condition, we pretty much end up with a problem of having literally pure white flat light coming from absolutely every side evenly, so there's barely any way to actually shade the character. Well, there are two things that we can do about it. Number one is ambient occlusion. When the light comes from absolutely every direction, what we can do is to pay more attention to shading in the areas where any surfaces collide together. So we just make those areas stronger. Right here, especially here, where two knees or something, they kind of like face each other and there's not a lot of light coming from outside. So we add a stronger shadow. You see, the original barely has, like, it doesn't have any dark color. The darkest color is middle brightness. This is too low. This is a very flat contrast. From white to middle gray, we should go from white to almost black, like really close to it. Not necessarily pure black, but so you see right now I'm adding this strong shadow where like two massive limbs collide together. So there's not a lot of shadow is in there. This kind of looks like a butt now, but whatever. In there as well, maybe a little bit brighter just because it's behind the glass and this glass is obviously reflecting all this pure white from everywhere. So it generally will have like a little foggy effect on it. So yeah, this is one thing we can do, is add just more shadows in the areas where you collide. Also, of course, we should add the shadow from the character on the actual floor. Just a little shadow right here. It would work. Generally, by making the color darker, we can go from a little bit like blue, or maybe actually the pink, because there is like a reflected light from the skin onto the floor. Yeah, like adding a little bit of pink to the shadow color. That kind of stuff, and even stronger. Where two objects actually collide completely, you pretty much end up having pure black in the very close collision area, but it's a very tiny one, especially when, like right now, the light is literally from there on my palms. There's only a super tiny line in between when there's really dark ambient occlusion situation. Aside from that, there's not a lot of stuff going on. So yeah, ambient occlusion, we're gonna be doing that. We'll render it better, but let's talk about the second little trick to have a nice shading that will make the whole object look a lot more interesting. Fresnel effect. This is a perfect situation to have it look awesome. Fresnel effect, I've been talking about it a few times. Let's say we have a phone, right? So you look at it like this. It's kind of shiny a little bit. It reflects the light source, the actual backside like this. This is a matte kind of plastic. It's pretty much not exactly reflective. Like you can't see the reflection of the camera, but as I'm rotating it away like this, you will start seeing almost like a pure reflection of my finger right now. At a very strong angle, the reflection gets a lot stronger. Every object in the world has this effect. Depending on how reflective the object is in general, this effect will be stronger or less strong. Like this, the back of the phone is really not that reflective, so at a big angle we see just a little bit of that effect. On more of a reflective objects, like on the skin actually, on the glass, on the wet skin, as this is obviously all of it is supposed to be the wet skin, this effect will be really strong. But of course the visibility of this effect will be even stronger when the background is bright. So right now you can see a lot of Fresnel effect on my skull right here because the background is darker than my skin. But in this scenario, when we have the character in pure white background, it will be always visible really well. All over this character you will see a very smooth and kind of like rich looking gradient of white color. This looks really cool. This is what makes like Apple product ads look so awesome. So basically how to do that is you analyze the shape of an object, like right here, the forearm. This is a cylinder pretty much, right? So this object is like this, right? So this is like a cylinder, and in the back it's going like this. Because it's a cylinder, the biggest angle we'll see, like in here it's facing at us, in here it's facing away, and at the very edge of the object it's facing absolutely sideways. So exactly right next to the edge, it faces almost completely away. So the angle is really big on round objects in the direction of their roundness. On the cylinder, on the sides, will have a much stronger effect. So in this case, we grab the color and we move it closer to the white, and we add this kind of rim light, rim reflection effect all over the object. Even in the shadow area, when there is no obstacle for the reflection, like in this situation, it will have this cool looking reflection everywhere. Remember it to make brighter than the original color of the object, but definitely noticeably darker than the actual white background. For two reasons, the physical one and the artistic one. The physical one is that no matter what reflection you're looking at, it's never gonna be 100% reflection, meaning any reflection is always at least a little bit darker than the original object that is being reflected. So if the background is pure white, then the reflection should be less bright, more transparent. So we can't have like this kind of reflection on the object because it's physically incorrect. And the artistic reason to do that is because, well, we'll just lose the silhouette of the character. We won't see its actual shape if we lose all the details on the edges of the object so much, so it's gonna just look weird. So yeah, make sure that the color is contrast enough to be impressive, but don't overdo it so you wouldn't lose your object on the edges. See, right away we have like a bit of a more information about what we're looking at, because there is not just a flat color, but there's some kind of change going on all over the surface of it. Now we can see how it's actually changing all over this curve. So those are the two things you can do. Ambient occlusion shadows in the close collisions of surfaces. We'll add a lot more of that everywhere. And second is this Fresnel effect. And don't forget that the glass is really reflective, so the Fresnel effect on it is gonna be pretty awesomely looking as well. So this huge sphere right here made of glass, I'll actually use a separate layer just because the original art style is so ideal kind of looking, and I'll just do this. There we go, it looks like a glass that has this foggy reflection of a pure white surrounding. And to have an even better contrast of that, will improve the contrast in this area, like it will make it darker and more saturated a little bit to bring it a bit closer to these colors, even though it's under the glass. But at the very like 90-degree angle to the camera right here, it can become a bit more transparent, so we'll see better colors. So yeah, let's do that. Also, I maybe wanna play around with the pose. I'm pretty sure I do, because like concept-wise, the pose is really cool. I like it, but one thing that is really bothering me is that this glass bowl is absolutely vertical. Like, it feels like something's wrong. Why is it so vertical when the whole character is so kind of crooked and barely trying to stand still or anything? This is like a very tense kind of pose to have. I would at least like tilt it a little bit, and maybe the legs would like balance it out, so it would be a bit like this, you know? So yeah, these are the thoughts at the moment. If I'll have something more to say, I will after I'm done, but for now, let's start rendering. Okay, so I rendered quite a lot of the glass area right here, and the neck area as well. Right now I'm working a bit more on the limbs at the bottom, improving the shading and making the shape of the limbs themselves to be a bit more spiky, to, you know, have a stronger gesture of their shape, of their pose. So I think this kind of more spiky elbows or knees, elbows probably, work a lot better. And yeah, adding much more like higher contrast shadows, even stronger, and it starts to look really like high contrast. Really nice, I think. I made the color of the skin a lot more saturated in the center to have a really like a pretty contrast between the reflection on the edges and the color of the skin in the middle. But yeah, let's talk about the way I rendered the glass for a moment, right? So first of all, in the beginning we had this, which is a much more flat kind of rendering, obviously, but there was some attempt to make a soft shading everywhere, but a little bit. Couple of things on just how to render glass and water, which I think turned out pretty awesomely. Like, I like what I'm looking at right now. So first of all, of course, water is not blue. That's pretty much obvious, right? But if it's not blue, what color to choose, especially when the environment is pure white? Same as the glass, right? Well, thing is, with the glass, Felisa made a pretty good decision of making it the color of the, like, close to the color of the skin of the character. I don't know if that was intentional or just because it fit well, but that's exactly how you do it, in a sense that if the only actual colorful object that may be reflected or refracted by the glass or water is this pink color, then the only color that may appear in the glass or water will be that pink color. That's why I repainted the whole water thing, except for some little details right here. I'll probably work on them as well and make them paler, but I actually made a little hint of blue in here, adding like if this water has a little bit of blue ambience in it, which is something that happens, but as you can see, it's much more subtle than when it's just like a closer to a cartoonish just blue water, you know? That's why it's blue and cartoonish, because generally water does have a little bit of blue ambience in it, but it's nothing comparing to the ambience that water receives from the lighting reflected from the nearby objects, like this violet color. So I made the glass and the water mostly just of this violet color, because this is how things go. Now, a very interesting thing going on right here, on the very edges of the spherical area of the glass. The thing about it, that we have like a double layer of shading here, and it's really kind of like hard to decide how to go about it, so you always sort of experiment and try what looks better. What I'm talking about is, first of all, glass has some color in it. By color, I mean it's not 100% transparent, same as no object is 100% reflective. Even mirror is 99% reflective. Glass is 99% transparent. That means if we have like this spherical area of the bottle, it's made of thick glass, right? Maybe not as thick, obviously, but sometimes it might be that thick. But generally, this is the thickness of just the glass, and this is the negative space inside of the bottle, right? So it goes kind of like this if we would cut this thing in half. Now, because of this, what happens is if we would cut it like this and look from the top, it would look, well, just like this, right? If we would cut it like this and look at it from the top. That means like the camera is right here, right? Not camera, we're not in 3D or something. The eyeball is right here, right? It's facing here. And this is how we look at this bottle at this cut in here. Now check out how the ray of the light travels through this bottle to get into our eyeballs. So it comes like, I'm not exactly counting the refraction. It's not the thing I'm talking about right now. But generally, if we look in the middle, that is the most transparent area. We have this thickness of the glass and this thickness of the glass, combining that very tiny 1% color of the glass, like darkening of the glass, opacity of the glass. At this angle, it will be this and this. A little bit longer distance in this wall and this wall, so a little bit thicker. Now in here, it will become like a little bit more noticeably longer, right? As it travels to our eyeball. But in here, it's gonna be like a constant big line. It's the biggest amount of glass that we see at the same time at one spot. Like basically we're looking at a wall of glass of this thickness. It will become a lot thicker and more opaque. And that's why we get darker at the edges of the glass. Now with water is a bit different, but water is generally a bit less opaque, so it's not that obvious. Like in the ocean we can easily see everything, but if the ocean would be made of glass, it would be a lot less transparent. So just this little amount of water doesn't change that much. It changed more of how the image is being distorted with the refraction. But generally, that's how we go about it. But that's one layer of shading that we apply. We darken things at the edges. But if I would just do that, we would just have the dark edge like this, and we would shade things away this way. But thing is, there's a second layer of reflection. And because of that, on top of this dark gradient of opacity of the glass, we start adding a light layer of shading for the reflection of the glass. And because of that, it generally becomes brighter, because at the very edge, reflection always wins, because at the very edge, like if here we've got this big thickness, at the very edge we will have a smaller thickness and a smaller one, so the thickness becomes smaller, but the reflection keeps getting stronger and stronger because the angle becomes more and more, and with this angle we almost see the actual pure color of what's behind the glass. That's why at the very edge it kind of becomes even brighter, but before that it gets darker. So it's like a little bit of a double gradient, but you really have to like feel through this thickness of the glass and reflectivity at the same time. It's a very interesting experience if you really invest yourself into thinking through how this geometry and shading works, with keeping in mind these angles and everything. It really pays off and things look really nice. So that's one thing on the shading of the sphere, and in here as well, like this angle is really strong, like this surface is facing completely upwards, so a very strong angle. That's why this plane right here is really light. It has a really strong reflection. But same as with the sphere, in here we have a darker area in here, but then reflection starts winning and we get a brighter edge again. So that's how we have this double thing going on. And about the actual refraction, the distortion of the image from the glass in here, like you see this kind of lines, right? And in here, and this stuff going on. Well, literally, I know you're probably probably expecting to hear something amazing about how exactly math of the refraction works, or maybe you're afraid to hear that. Well, if you're afraid, don't worry, you just pretty much do this kind of shapes everywhere. That's all I do. Everywhere where some kind of object meets the edge of this refractive thing, it just starts doing that. And in here I'll also add it probably. And that's about it. That's all I do. It's very rare when I have to think something more on the refraction side, because it's really not gonna pay off all that much. People still don't know how the refraction works, so you can kind of fake it. No one cares. We really know well how the lighting works. We really know how faces look like or something like that, or hands. But with the refraction, it really depends on the density of the material. Like glass and diamond have very different kind of distortion. It's like the way you want it to be, pretty much. And one last thing on the shading. Inside of the water, I have a bit of a different shading than outside of it, because inside of water, usually there's, because of the whole distortion, less rays get to the surface of an object. That's why I generally made it a bit darker, but also because I just wanted to emphasize the dark, mysterious personality of this creature. But also what we really have a lot underwater is this kind of strong lighting up of the cool watery color on all the surfaces, even though we have it everywhere because the object is wet even outside, but in here it gets even stronger. That's because underwater, usually when an object, especially when it's underwater for a while, it has like a million tiny bubbles everywhere collecting on the surface of an object, and that's why you kind of have this effect of really lighting up at the edges. This really feels like underwater just because of that. So yeah, there's a lot of things to talk about on the rendering side, so this is a really cool kind of overpaint to have this time. Like, it's a very different one and we have a lot to talk about. Probably won't be able to describe everything clearly enough for you guys to not have any questions, but yeah, we'll have more talk on this kind of stuff in the future on how to render glass and water inside of the glass and everything. But yeah, generally this is what's up. Yeah, now I'm gonna work a little bit on the limbs. Also, I removed most of the color of the water puddles on the floor. Not necessarily water, it can be slightly bluish liquid, right? It's not necessarily supposed to be just transparent thing. So a little bit of extra emphasized blue is kind of cool looking. So what I'm adding right here is a little bit of like a silhouette kind of reflection. This is like this finger being reflected right here like this. And yeah, this one will be a bit darker over here. And just the nearest objects. Everything else doesn't really matter. So something like this. Maybe a little bit of this finger will be reflected on this side of the puddle. And that's about it. This hand is lifted in the air, like the character is obviously making a step forward with this hand. So yeah, no strong shadow from it on the floor or anything like that because it's in the air. So yeah, as you can see, the whole shading with the Fresnel effect and ambient shadows really allows you to have a very rich rendering, even though the lighting generally in the scene is really flat, just pure white everywhere. So we don't have a single flat spot on this character anywhere, because if it's facing away a bit more, like the angle will be just stronger away, it gets lighter, and as it's facing forward to us, it gets darker. So that's one thing. And whenever two objects collide together, having like a wrinkle or a crack or something like that, we just add a really dark tiny shadow in there to specify that those two surfaces are really close to each other, like here as well. Adding shadow between the fingers as well right here, and so on and so forth. So yeah, let's finish this, and that's about it. I pretty much talked about everything already, but yeah, let's just get this awesome character well rendered. Okay, done. So yeah, added some shading, paid some attention to the fingernails. Also, I kind of forgot in the middle of the process that this was a female character, so maybe I would make some other decisions on the face in that regard, but I guess we'll just keep it this way. Why not? This would be a female monster-ish creature. So yeah, also I'm not sure. This character could very much possibly have like actual legs, but we don't see them bottom in here, so I decided to adapt that into kind of like just a tail. I think it works pretty well, especially with this tip of the tail doing this kind of stuff right here. It looks kind of cool. So yeah, I guess this is it. I think I pretty much said everything that needed to be said already, making this shadow much softer because the lighting is extremely soft, so whenever you have some distance, the shadow becomes really soft. Just a little hint to specify where exactly this palm is and what distance there is between the surface and the hand to show that it's actually raised. That's why it's important to have that. So yeah, this is it. Some latest improvements right here. Yeah, I made these slippery, gooey things at the bottom more dynamic, so it would look like the character is actually moving, because initially the water is kind of implying that as well, that the character is moving around, so this also should follow that same logic. So yeah, also I moved the character a bit away, like I made it smaller, just to have a bit more space at the top and at the bottom. Always a good idea to give some space for the character. So yeah, this is it. Tell me guys what you think about the results. If you have some questions about the reflection, let me know. I'll make more videos on that, on how to render this kind of bottle with water situation or something. Didn't actually make the water less blue on the surface, but whatever, I think it looks kind of cool this way too. A little bit like this. And I thank you for watching. If you did, I guess you did. If you're here, leave a like and subscribe, tell a friend. Maintain the balance. Do whatever you want. And I will see you in the next one. Bye! Love the character, it's such a cool idea.